Okay, guys, we were talking about pro-social behavior, helping on Monday, and we were talking about ways to understand it, how to encourage it, what leads people to be more or less likely to engage in helping. In your textbook, they're going to talk about a lot more than I can here in lecture. Here in lecture, I talked about some basic learning principles that apply to many kinds of social behavior, including helping behavior. And we also talked about a theory of helping that is grounded in the idea that helping, you really need people to feel empathy if you want them to engage in helping, particularly of the pure altruistic kind. This is Dan Batson's empathy altruism hypothesis, and we'll pick up on that in a second. But in your textbook, you're going to read about other things that matter, such as gender or culture or environment, various aspects of the environment that might influence whether or not people engage in helping. You're going to talk about, or have talked about in section, about evolutionary kind of perspectives on helping. So be sure to read the full range. I cannot cover all the enormous amount of research that's been done on such a central social behavior as helping. To recap a little bit, Dan Batson is a major player in the helping literature in social psychology. He has been wanting to put forth this argument that pure altruistic helping can occur, helping that is not motivated by any sort of selfish concerns, by any sort of calculation about what the self stands to gain or lose. So we talked about that already. And I gave you an empirical example demonstrating support for his theory, but I also drew your attention to some controversies about his theory, some of which I think some of you are already thinking about on your own. One of the controversies has to do with this idea that if people are feeling empathy and that is what's driving their helping behavior, maybe it's not appropriate to characterize that as pure helping behavior, as altruism, because feeling empathy means, by definition, experiencing the other person's distress, the helpee's distress. And so maybe you can interpret the helping behavior as something that is as something that the self is gaining from, that is, it is relieving, it is a way to relieve one's own personal distress, that one feels because one is experiencing the other person's distress. I talked about how Dan Batson has tried to counter this argument in various empirical ways by showing that people still help when they're feeling empathy, even when they're told that they can anticipate watching a funny movie very soon, that they're still willing to help, that it's not about this positive mood anticipation kind of thing. A second point of controversy has to do with the idea, and we already touched on this a little bit, this idea that some people, such as children, could be socialized to think of themselves as helpful people. It can become part of your self-concept that I am an altruistic, helpful, empathic person. To not help with that kind of self-concept would, as we know, be dissonance arousing, right? I'm someone who is helpful, I'm not coming to the aid of this person, maybe the helping that I am engaging in then is therefore selfish, in part because I'm trying to avoid or reduce any sort of dissonance. Okay, it's reasonable. You ought to find it reasonable based on what you know about dissonance. My personal opinion, so controversies like this still rage on for those in this particular sub-area of our field. It's not an area I know a huge amount about. My personal opinion is a little bit who cares about, this is really important, I suppose, from a theoretical perspective. Not I suppose, it is very important from a theoretical perspective, but from a practical societal perspective. If we can get people to help, I don't want people to help out of getting a monetary reward, okay, and that's the problem a lot of times when they give, they offer a reward for information to capture some sort of criminal. This is a problem because people are being motivated by extrinsic monetary rewards. But if somebody's going to help because they're personally distressed, because they're feeling empathy, or because they think of themselves as a helpful person and want to reduce their dissonance, I'm okay with that. I would accept help motivated by those reasons, and I wouldn't find it a horrible thing for our society for a lot of helping to be motivated, in part, as being not 100% purely altruistic. Okay, you may have a different opinion, but of course theoretically it matters, and it matters, I suppose, ultimately practically, because if you want to really understand how to encourage helping behavior, you do really need to understand the underlying reasons why people engage in helping. But from a practical perspective, any kind of helping related to empathy, in my book, is not a bad thing. Okay, so we've had so far learning principles as one approach to understanding helping. Empathy is another approach to understanding helping. Now I want to talk about the last approach that I'll be able to cover here in lecture, which has to do with this phenomenon, which I believe you may have heard of in Psych 1. It's one of those social psychology things that you learn about oftentimes in a Psych 101 or Psych 1 class, like Milgram's experiment, like Ash's experiment, so too the bystander effect. So what is the bystander effect? This is the counterintuitive, until you know the effect, okay, but initially counterintuitive notion that the greater number of people bearing witness to a situation where someone needs help, the less likely help is going to be delivered. This is counterintuitive. It seems almost irrational. I mean, if you were to imagine that you were in a situation where you needed help, you were injured, your vehicle broke down, what have you, your first impulse might be, oh, the more people around, the better. I can ask them for help. I'll be more likely, more choices, more options to get help from, more people. But in fact, what the data suggests is that the exact opposite is the case. Okay, this is one of those cool, important counterintuitive social psychology findings. A lot of you know what inspired the research on bystander effect. You know about the Kitty Genovese story? Yeah, so you know about this woman back in the 1960s in New York City who was attacked repeatedly over a substantial period of time, over an hour or 2 hours. The attacker went away, came back, and attacked her around a set of apartment buildings. And they made a lot of noise. This attack was not a quiet one. And she was screaming, and the attacker was making noises, and there were lights on in the apartment buildings suggesting people were awake and could hear what was going on. Newspaper reports suggest that there were 37 people who witnessed in some way the crime being, happening, and not a single one for a long time called the police or themselves intervened to help. Now, there are some controversies, I believe, even still in the news these days. I saw one recently about the reporting of this tragedy. But I don't think the facts are in dispute. There were a lot of witnesses, and surprisingly, okay, even if there were 10 witnesses, it's still surprising that nobody went down to try to help this woman. I think the controversies have to do with, at that time, the person who wrote up the original report for whatever newspaper it was, made it as sort of evidence or used it as a commentary of the decline of community in cold, harsh cities like New York City. So they were making a broader societal point, which many people argued with. Okay, so that's beside the point. If you're reading about controversies, I think it had more to do with what that incident meant. From a social psychologist's perspective, it certainly did not speak to anything particular about New York City, okay, or about cities and what cities are like and how they make people harsh and not care about each other and selfish and so forth. Instead, several social psychologists, Viv Latney and John Darley, had this counterintuitive notion that it may be precisely because there were multiple witnesses to this crime, whether it happened in a rural environment or a city environment, on a college campus, in a nice neighborhood, in a scary neighborhood, what have you, that the number of bystanders present, that there were a good number of them, that could be the actual explanation for the phenomenon. So in a classic experiment that they conducted at NYU back in the 1960s, they had participants come into the lab one at a time. They thought they were coming into the lab with a group of other participants, or at least one other participant, and they were told that they were going to have, that the study entailed having a group discussion over an intercom system. So everybody's intercoms were on, and you could hear each other via intercom. Unbeknownst to the participant, there was only him or her, that single participant. Everybody else was a confederate, a stooge of the experimenter. The experiment was rigged so that one of the alleged other participants had an epileptic fit during this group discussion in a very obvious way. Because again, you could hear each other in the separate rooms because you're having this group discussion. And what they were interested, so this is somebody who clearly could use some help, what they were interested in is the likelihood or the time it would take for participants to get up and do something about this, to report that this participant is in need, to get up out of their seat, to go get the experimenter, what have you. The independent variable in this study was the size of the group that participants thought they were in. In other words, the number of bystanders, the number of witnesses to this emergency situation. Participants were led to believe there was either one other participant, so they were a group of two other participants, so they were a group of three, or five other participants, so they were a group of six. Okay, so the number of bystanders, witnesses to this emergency situation varied. And here are the data. Now, well, let me first talk quickly about the data. The percentage of people who get up to do something within the first 60 seconds, you can see goes down drastically as you move, as the number of people in the group increases. You have 85% going when they think they're the only other person listening to this person having this medical situation, and then we're down to less than a third when they think there's 5 other people listening, or 4 other people listening to this person having this medical situation. The percentage of people that help when they let the experiment go on for a full 6 minutes, you get 100% of people going when they think they're the only other person, they're the only witness to this situation, medical emergency situation. And again, the numbers go down as you increase the number of bystanders, the number of witnesses. Now, I will hasten to say it wasn't the case that people in the 6 or the 3-person group were, filing their nails, hanging out, thinking, oh, whatever. They weren't callous and unconcerned, but nonetheless, they did not get up as frequently or as quickly as participants who felt like they were solely responsible for this other participant, or the sole witness to this emergency situation. With me? Okay, so what exactly is going on psychologically? What exactly is it about bystanders that leads to this decline in helping? Okay, I've already spilled out, not intentionally, some words to suggest what is going on psychologically. What is it about bystanders that changes our construals of the situation and therefore our behavior? I find this little 5-step chart to helping useful. Okay, you can take your time and write it. It'll also be posted on BSpace. It's not mind blowing or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward, but it helps us identify or talk about how exactly bystanders might derail things, derail the likelihood of helping at various steps of this helping process. So, according to Darley and Latine, in order for helping to occur, the first step is you need to notice the event. Okay, that seems obvious, but you do need to notice the event. You may be walking along in a park and not realize that there's some sort of attack happening in the bushes. You may never notice the event. You need to interpret. Now we're getting into construals here. You need to interpret the event as an emergency. Okay, we've talked about situations, especially social situations, oftentimes ambiguous. Is that mother who slapped her child engaging in appropriate discipline, or is this a situation where you ought to be intervening and calling the authorities? Okay, that's a very painfully ambiguous situation for people to see. Third, you need to say, okay, assume responsibility. I need to do something about it, as the people in the 2-person group did. Okay, 100% of them within 6 minutes. It's up to me. I got to do something. Okay, how many of you have ever taken some sort of CPR or other medical training sort of course? And what's one of the rules that they teach you? Right, when you need help, what do? Do you say, hey, somebody call 911? Right, you point somebody out, and that's implicitly because they know you got to have someone assume responsibility. Don't go, hey, somebody call 911. Guess what? Bystander effects could happen. A lot of people out there, somebody else will call, I'm sure, whatever. Okay, no, can you please go call 911? That's one of the things you learn in these kinds of courses, lifeguarding, CPR, what have you. Okay, you got to know how to assist, right? I mean, you can't assist a cardiac arrest situation or some person having a baby on an airplane without, you could try, but it'd be helpful if there was a medical professional around, and then you actually have to implement the decision. Let's talk about exactly how bystanders might derail you at the first 3 steps where they're most relevant. Okay, this is sort of boring, but you may fail to notice the event because bystanders are distracting you from noticing it in the first place. So when there's a lot of people around milling about, in some sort of large public space, it may be too loud. You may not be able to hear that there's some sort of altercation going on, or that somebody, in a stadium situation fell down and is injured, but everybody else is rushing to get up or get out of the stadium or something like that. Bystanders, having more people around, may be a source of distraction that prevents you from even noticing that there's somebody who needs help. More interesting from a social psychological perspective is the interpretation, the construals part of things. Bystanders, how they're reacting to a situation, is a form of social influence. And to the degree a situation is ambiguous, is that mother inappropriately hurting her child to discipline them? Other people around don't seem to be reacting to this. I could use these other people's lack of reaction as a source of informational influence. Oh, well, they must think it's totally appropriate, so I guess I'm going to interpret the situation as appropriate. Okay, and that's totally a reasonable thing to do. We know about informational social influence. Okay, a lot of times other people's behavior serves as a useful and accurate source of information. Everybody's lining up at that window instead of this window to get into this particular movie. Well, I'm pretty sure then that that's the right window to line up at. Okay? But the problem is this phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance. And this is this idea that the problem could be that everyone is assuming this about everybody else. Okay? So I may be sitting here thinking that this is not an emergency because you're not doing anything about it. The problem is you're thinking the very same thing about my lack of reaction. And this, therefore, is resulting in a case of pluralistic, multiple-person state of ignorance. Okay? Because we're all assuming that other people's behavior means something. Okay? We're all assuming the same thing about each other's behavior. The classic example of this that you guys will relate to is when a teacher asks in a class, hey, does anybody have any questions? Does everybody understand this? Everyone looks around and no one's answering. No one's raising their hand, so you think, oh, I guess I'm the only one that doesn't get it. The problem is everyone is thinking that about everyone else, so nobody raises their hand. Another example of a case of pluralistic ignorance. So bystanders could be used as a source of information, but unfortunately sometimes that being used as a source of information could be the wrong use. Okay, it could be an inaccurate source of information. You assume nothing is wrong because no one else seems concerned, but of course everybody else is thinking of that about everyone else, including you. It's an example of informational social influence going awry, not working in a productive, adaptive way. Finally, probably the most well-known explanation for why bystanders have this counterintuitive effect on helping is that it leads to a diffusion of responsibility. Oh, I can see other people are bearing witness to this crime. There's about 10, 12 other lights on. I'm sure one of them can call the police and get involved. I don't want to have to talk to the police at 3 in the morning. Okay, oh, well, somebody else will tell that woman, the checkout lady will tell that woman not to scream at her child that way. Okay, diffusion of responsibility. More people around, more people you can pass the buck to. Okay, and assume that other people will take up responsibility. This is why, again, in the CPR, et cetera type courses, they want you to make sure that you assign somebody responsibility because of knowledge of this diffusion of responsibility phenomenon. Okay? Okay, so very different perspectives on helping. It's about learning it, encouraging it via learning principles. It's about an emotional state that triggers it, empathy. It could be about the social environment, okay, which of course is probably the most obviously social psychological explanation for helping behavior. Again, look in your textbook for other explanations or factors to consider when you're trying to understand prosocial behavior. Okay, we are moving ahead to the last topic of this last unit of the course. Last but not least topic, and that topic is a biggie. It's a big one. It includes stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination, all related but not the same thing, and how groups in society, members of different groups in society, black, white, Cal, Stanford, men, women, psych majors, pre-med majors, what have you, how they interact. Jews and Muslims, straight and gays, okay, all different members of different groups, how they interact, what's known as intergroup relations. How many of you have taken Psych 167? Okay, some of you have taken Mendoza-Denton's class on stigma and prejudice, so you will recognize some of the things that we'll be talking about the last 3 or 4 lectures of the semester. Okay, I want to start off this unit. What am I doing here? I want to start off this unit by showing you guys a video that you may have seen before. I've seen, literally 50 times, so and still find it interesting. I can actually act it out probably for you now. I want to make a little bit of a plug for social psychology for a second, inspired a little bit by some teaching sort of presentation I saw yesterday. I hope that I made clear in the beginning of the semester, and I'll certainly bring it home at the end of the semester, that a lot of what us social psychologists do bears relevance to not just our everyday lives, which I know a lot of you guys feel in my discussions one-on-one with you, and just because so many of the examples given are sort of everyday examples, but they also have relevance to bigger societal problems, okay? Helping behavior, okay? It has implications for how one should run some sort of campaign to get people to donate to ALS, the Ice Bucket Challenge. There's an article in the New York Times this week about trying to understand what the heck was it about the Ice Bucket Challenge. We all know about this, right? Dumping the ice water on you or donating $100 to ALS. And these are important, big societal things. Like, what makes it so that some medical professionals are willing to go to Africa to help Ebola patients? Okay, what is it? What kind of advertisements really persuade people to engage in important health practices? Okay, et cetera, et cetera. Many ways in which social psychology has relevance to grander, bigger societal challenges. Okay, and I hope that you have made these connections. But the area where we have made the biggest contribution, most obvious one thus far, is what we have had to say. We social psychologists have shed light on stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination, and intergroup relations. Our executive vice chancellor and provost, Claude Steele, who I very proudly, am telling you is a social psychologist. This is exciting. Okay, he gave us this notion of stereotypes which you'll read about in the textbook, but many of you have heard about already in other contexts. Yes, no, enormous implications for achievement and race and achievement disparities, racial achievement disparities, gender achievement disparities in our culture, in our society, in our country, in the world. Okay, so I just want you to be aware that the things that you're going to be learning today, there's so many applications, and we have been involved in many national level kinds of discussions, dialogues, initiatives, and so forth, based on our empirical findings to try to improve, to try to make the world a better place, a more peaceful place. Okay, whether it's here in the United States, relations between different minority groups and the majority group, whether it's about Palestinians and Jews in Israel, our findings have been applied to try to understand and alleviate conflict, intergroup strife, and so forth in the world. Okay, so these are the topics we are going to end the course with. The Eye of the Storm video. This is, I don't know why they call it that. I mean, I do know why they call it that, but I'm realizing you guys might not know what I'm referring to, but instead you'll know when I say that this is a video about the brown eye, blue eyes experiment. Yeah, some of you have heard about it? Some of you, yeah. That Jane Elliott, this I000 third grade teacher back in the 60s, okay, did a little experiment over the course of a week in her third grade classroom. She did this experiment on the heels, it was in the late 1960s, of Martin Luther King being assassinated. Okay, this was the heart of the civil rights movement in our country, a lot of tension, racial tension happening, and this is a teacher who is in this incredibly homogeneous, homogeneous, ethnically and religious community. Okay, these are students in her third grade classroom who are white, and do not have interaction or really have a lot of knowledge about minorities in the United States. And she was inspired, it's a weird word to say, but inspired by the events during that time, really not inspired, but really desperate or anxious to really teach her students something about otherness and about what it feels like to be treated as a member of a minority group, so they could really taste and experience what that must feel like for the things that are going on beyond the classroom. Okay, so here's her, it's about a 25-minute clip. It's entertaining, and it's really interesting, and you can imagine various analogs to this kind of experiment. And it's been repeated in various ways in classrooms and various organizations since. So here we go.
This is Saunders and Raymond School.